there's not a ton of stuff, so he should
There's
be
not much. I feel like I can't answer much of it, but I'll wait to talk about why when we get into
okay.
it.
Probably because you weren't there and you guys didn't cover it.
Yeah, and then I maybe reached out to somebody who was there, and they're on spring break, and
Uh-huh. Mhm.
yep.
I'm glad you're talking like this because only
Yeah.
you and I can hear.
As
No
long as
one
you talk
else.
like this,
No
nobody
one else
on the
can.
live stream will know what's going
It's our
on.
little
It
secret.
looks like I'm just having a look-see-loo with you. I'm not even speaking at all.
Everyone on the live is only lip reading.
And just
We never knew.
and you watch the viewer number go up and back down.
And what a twist. Wild twist. The twist is that the apple was real.
It is a wild twist.
Oh,
Man, I can't get enough. People are like, I still haven't even tried an Envy because I just know I love the Cosmic Crisp so good. And you know who weirdly has the best Cosmic Crisp apples right now in my
oh.
area? And I hate to say this because normally their produce is garbage. Freaking Walmart. The
Huh.
Walmart in Niles,
They
Michigan,
cornered the market.
they have big, beautiful, sparkly, shiny. But you know what? The care that
Yeah.
some of the employees at that Walmart
Well,
give is not top notch. I'll tell you what. I go to
I thought
checkout.
you were gonna say. Oh, I
I
was
go to
hoping you were
checkout.
gonna make a
I
joke.
throw 6 of those Whoppers, them Whoppers of Cosmic Crisp into a bag, and
Uh-huh.
I go to checkout, and the cashier lady's just like somebody was just yapping at her, and she's just like, they just said go too fast. I need to slow down. But that's the thing is I just go fast. And then she started like bagging my shit,
Oh,
like she was trying to show off to me how fast she could be.
huh.
And when she did it, she flung 2 of my apples out of the fucking bag. Like they flew down, hit one of them,
Oh,
bounced off
no.
the
No,
little thing, the spinny thing where the bags
that's a new
are,
apple for you.
and the other one went bounce, 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 bounce,
No,
bounced, and then she picked it up and then
no.
went to put it back in the bag to weigh it. And I was like, I reached over,
No,
I'm like,
no, 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 no.
you can keep that one,
Yeah.
and you can keep that one. She's like, you don't want them? I'm like, no, have you never eaten an apple before? It's just gonna be a bruised up mess. What are you?
Yeah.
And I wasn't about to go walk back to the other set, so I just came home with
Yeah.
4 apples instead of 6 apples.
Yeah. I assume she only charged you for 4.
Yeah, she was in the
Yeah.
process of putting them
Right,
on the
right, right,
scale to
right, right.
weigh
Yeah,
them
yeah,
when she
yeah.
did it, but then she was gonna put them back on it and weigh them and give me
Yeah.
those, like,
I had
one of
someone do
them.
that with an avocado once too, and I was like, why would I ever no,
This,
don't
like,
give me this.
this apple would be the equivalent if you were like, if imagine like a person at the tippy top of a tree fell down and hit every branch on the way down, like like a cartoon. That's what that apple did. It was like
Like a
the
pinball
register
machine.
bounced off, hit
Yeah.
the floor, hit somebody's foot, got run over by a cart. It was,
Here you go, sir. Oh,
yeah,
no.
and it was just
Oh,
right
Tool
after.
Girl, not feeling the Cosmic Crisp. Went ahead, stuck with Honey Crisp. I hear
Lots of,
you. Okay.
no, well, maybe Meyer had some bad cosmetics. I don't know. I've gotten some of Meyer that were pretty. I've never had a bad one. I got, as you've said, Janet, I've
Yeah, I've
never had
never
a
had a
bad
bad
one.
one.
But I got some at the our
Mm-mm.
Martin's store last week, and they were kind of small,
Mhm.
not super flavorful like you usually
M'kay.
get with a Cosmic Crisp.
Mhm.
And I was like, man, maybe my taste buds have dulled to them. And then
Yeah.
I got them Walmart Cosmic Crisp. I'm like, there she is.
There's my girl.
There's my girl. So juicy. You take a bite, it's like there's stuff
Yeah.
dripping down your chin.
Maybe it was a cosmic crasp, and it's like the apple of the lady beetle, the Asian lady beetle,
You know, I
or
don't want to talk
gone.
about this. I'm so mad that I feel bad for the ladybugs that I've been cussing
I
them this whole
know. You've
time.
been spreading lies about the ladybugs.
Listen, why would there
Better
be
make it right.
what scientist was like, here's 2 bugs that look identical. Let's name them something different. Because one
Wait,
has,
why is that? Oh,
you got to get so close to them to count the spots to know which
yeah.
one's which.
Uh-huh.
They're all just ladybugs.
Nah. These lady beetles are, you said it, they're vengeful, they're stinky.
They bite, they smell bad, they're
Yeah.
invading my home. But that's definitely what they are. Like
Ladybugs? No,
everything that
lady
thing
beetles?
described was
Yes.
100%.
I've never had a ladybug do anything untoward or stink.
But we
I've
did see they
only
do
had
bite.
eh. That's like science being like, I guess technically they can kind of bite. You might maybe occasionally once in a lifetime
It's
feel
kind of like
one tiny little pinch, maybe.
it's kind of like you shouldn't drink on this medication when really they don't want you to have
Wait,
any fun.
what? Hold on.
You know what I mean?
It's just like that? It's just like that?
Yeah, it's like,
Uh-oh,
it's not
uh-oh,
really a real thing, but
uh-oh,
it's just a thing
uh-oh.
they
Oh, no. Uh,
I just that's,
yeah.
I don't drink. I didn't know. I only know this because Becky has been keeping track. I didn't know this, that apparently I haven't had a drink in 90 days.
Oh, wow. So she is keeping track.
Yeah. She was like, have had an app. Like, I just don't want to drink anymore. So I just don't. Like,
Yeah.
I had one drink on New Year's Eve, which apparently was 90 days ago.
Whoa, that's a
And
trip right there.
yeah, and I don't remember when I had one before that, but she was just the other day. She's like, I haven't had a drink in 90 days. I have this little app. I'm like,
Hmm.
this is my wife. She has an app to track when she drinks, when she doesn't drink.
That's a nice reminder if you wanna check in with
So she's
not
made
drinking.
one entry
Yeah,
and just looks
that's
to
good.
see how many days it's been since
That's
she put
good.
one into it. Yeah.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure that I mean, that's gotta feel that means she's feeling good about it.
Yeah. But back in
Have we
my
told
younger
people that we
years,
don't have Zach? I guess we have never said that we don't have Zach.
I think they figured it out when they don't see Zach.
Yeah, but then in the chat, usually there's someone who's like, "Where's Zach?" And we're
Oh, yeah.
like, "Oh, fuck. Yeah,
We're
we
just
don't
so
have
used to
him."
us not all three being here. But my classic line was, and this is sometime I was like in my 20s. I remember with my ex-wife, I had had a shoulder surgery, and they gave me Vicodin, and I was in so much pain. And I remember like taking my Vicodin and then pouring a glass of bourbon and sitting down. She's like, "You're not." It says right on the bottle you can't drink with that medicine. I said, "That's just because they don't want you to have any fun." That's what it's-
And how'd it go?
I feel like I went to sleep like a baby after that. I don't
Uh-huh.
know.
Okay, all right.
And my skin got itchy and I didn't poop for 3 days. That's
Uh,
usually how Vicodin would go for
oh,
me.
no. Jennifer, no, we love ladybugs.
No,
It's the
Janet loves
lady
ladybugs.
beetles that Bob is not
Oh yeah,
caring for and that
you
I've
gotta
never
tune
met.
in. We gotta get going here, but you gotta tune into the pregame to see the whole discussion where we had a huge revelation
Yeah.
that there is a ladybug imposter out there that's putting a bad name on the ladybugs.
Yep.
Yeah. And with that,
Catfishing.
that's it for pregame. Bye guys.
Bye, everybody. Get in, get out on that goodbye.
I just realized it's already 7:08.
Yeah.
And I got that new couch calling my name.
I know.
Mandy just now asked. Thanks, Mandy. Where's Zach? We'll explain it.
He's on assignment. He had some sports stuff.
Kind of.
Nope.
Kind of. I may reveal his assignment today because it's pretty cool.
Oh, great. Yeah, please.
Let me know when you're ready to record.
I am so freaking ready.
Say when.
Hang on. We on. Recording.
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 Recording. 1, 2, 3. Great claps. Those are some good claps. You're welcome, Erica.
Oh my God, I have to do the intro.
I was just gonna say, did you remember you're the intro
Oh
lady?
no. What a season is this?
16. I think it was 1616, wasn't it? It should say, yeah, it's right at the top. If you look at the top of your screen, it says follow up 1616.
Oh, okay, great. All right. Ahoy, friends. You are listening to Truth and Justice Friday follow-up, season 16, episode 16. This is our follow-up discussion about the recent hearing, the evidence testing hearing that Bob Motta was able to attend for Jamie Snow. And we have a lot to catch up on and some listener questions. So before we get started, any housekeeping?
Listen, let's be clear here, people. There's not a lot to catch up on. It's spring break. Zach is on assignment, and his assignment is that he's taking his kids to a Chicago Bulls game for spring break. We usually don't tell you what the assignment is, but I think it's a pretty cool assignment that Zach's doing. It's spring break. I got a new couch I haven't sat on yet. Janet's been busy all day, so we're gonna get in here. We're gonna knock this thing out real quick. That's the plan. It's spring break edition of Truth and Justice. But I will say this before we get started, housekeeping wise. And Janet, you'll be excited to know this. If you hadn't thought about it, you probably haven't. You've been so busy. For those of you watching live, tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. on the Underestimated podcast, the Jeanette Robertson case begins.
Oh, great.
And I'm telling you, I know I talked about it last week. I cannot. And for those of you listening on Friday, it's already out. So you can, because it drops on Wednesdays. These students did such an incredible job on this series to the point where when I was helping Chelsea put music into the second episode, I was freaking out. Like I needed, like such a cliffhanger. Like I need to know what happens in episode 3, and they're like, "Oh, you don't get to
Wow.
know Mr. Ruff." Not to be like
Ooh.
so good. Their writing is so good. Their research is so good. Like they've just done. I am obviously the Skelton brothers that did. They're gonna get mad because it was so good. But this is kind of my pet case. But like this group has just knocked it out of the park. I cannot wait for you all to listen to it. You can just shut this off. Go listen to that because this is going to be a shit show here.
Wow.
No, kidding. Listen to this, and then go listen to Underestimated. But yeah, the next 3 episodes. So this Wednesday, next Wednesday, and the following will all be on the Jeanette Robertson case. Different group than did the first 3 episodes. Same feed. It's all in the Underestimated feed. But it's just really just so good. So make sure you check that out. Other housekeeping, we told you last week that we've officially signed NDAs and we're working on our next season, our season 17 case. Because of spring break, I actually had some time to be in the office with Erica, both her and I together. And we've gotten a lot further with it. We call it our murder board, our big 8-foot cork board with all the pictures and the things mapped out. And we've got one whiteboard with our storyboard where what we're going to do for the first 6 episodes, and then we've actually made it all the way to. So this is a little kind of how the sausage is made for us. Usually we'll lay out a block of episodes in like one form, saying, okay, that these are going to be the topics of these 6 episodes, and these are the bases of how we're going to break out the 3 acts of each episode, and then each episode, then we move over to our rundown board, which is a much more detailed storyboard for each single episode. So we're working on the episode 1 right now. In episode 1, what are we going to talk about? Where are we going to lay it out? Where are we going to draw resources from? You kind of make a beat sheet out of that. So we've got all the way that done through episode 1. Erica is now starting to write outlines to turn into scripts. I'm super excited. I've been kind of like pulled back a little bit from that case because we've been busy with school and with everything we're doing in the interim, and we've been waiting. I didn't want to get too deep in till we know for sure it was a go, but spending these last few days just like cramming into the case again, I'm excited to get started on that one. So everything's progressing forward. We're going to be I lost my train of thought, working towards season 17. And with that being said, and then one last thing, speaking of the spring break edition, I know that, although I'm going to warn you guys ahead of time, the answer to a lot of your questions are I don't know, because a lot of them are legal questions. I reached out to Bob, and Allie convinced him to go on kind of an impromptu spring break trip to Florida. And so, of course, Bob being Bob, he's like, "Oh, I'm in Florida, but I can take it." And I said, no.
Oh,
You enjoy your
yeah.
vacation and we'll figure it out. So with that being said, Janet, what'd you think about hearing all about Jamie's case?
Well, it's always interesting. I mean, yeah, I had some similar takeaways to a couple people who commented, who definitely, by the way, know the case far, far better than I do. And let's be frank, know the case as in its current state better than you do right now, Bob,
Yeah.
because you're working on so many different cases. So Jennifer Hill has put so much heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears into um, understanding Jamie Snow's case and advocating for him, and has just is an
And she was there.
extraordinary resource. Was there, and so there are. I would say the majority of the things that we have from the Facebook post are from Jen, because she's responding and with additional knowledge, and at times feeling that frustration of like, I want to be able to make sure that more is communicated out to people, and that
Yeah.
there were things that were a little more, I don't want to say in the weeds, because that makes it sound like it's not a good thing or that it's not worth talking about. That's definitely not what I mean. But I think I also had some kind of questions that it was one of those conversations where I wished that I could just pause it and be like, hey guys, let me just ask you this question as if I'm
Yeah.
also part of the conversation. But of course I couldn't do that. It was also like just a great not coincidence, but it was just it was an advantage that we had Bob there who could come on and talk about it. But I want to hear more from Jen, and I think we sort of got that a little bit in
Yeah.
her
So
follow-up post as well.
some of hers were questions, and some of them were just like clarifying a little bit more of
Mhm.
what's going on. Because, like you said, we finished covering Jamie's case on the show in 2020, I think.
Mhm.
So it's been 5 years since we've covered, and we've covered several cases since then. So I've been like, I've kept up little bits when things have been going on, but like, there's been a ton of activity on the case, and Jennifer and a handful of other listeners have like stayed constantly engaged in the case, in all the court proceedings and all the stuff that's gone on along the way. So they do know more about what's happening in that particular case than I do.
Yeah. So I guess I'll use my own observation about this as a way in, because one of the things that Jen points out in the Facebook post is about the lead judge telling Jamie's lawyer that he and the other two judges were former trial judges, so their sympathies are with the trial judge. And Jen says my internal response was WTF. I'm sure it's naive of me to think, doesn't that show how biased the judges are, and aren't they supposed to be objective? Is it normal to say something like that, that sort of blatantly biased? And I sort of, I mean, I had the same reaction. It's
Yeah.
just hard. So we all know, we hear over and over, and many of us have had our own experiences with how difficult this kind of work is, and how much it's sort of been hammered home that like being an appellate lawyer is incredibly difficult. And Bob Mata talks about how he's never surprised when they lose because it's so common and normal. But still, when you hear stuff like that, you're just like, I mean, talk about proof that I do not have the temperament to do something like that, because when I snap and my attitude comes in, I'm not very good at, I don't have a good game face. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, someone saying that to me, for me to, like, push that down, like, you have to be a very specific type of person to be able to handle authority that you don't agree with when something so important is on the line. And
Yeah.
being able to keep you cool, because I feel like if I had heard that, I've been like, "Oh, that's so funny. I thought this was supposed to be more objective than that." And they would be like, "And you're gonna go to jail. And this
Right.
whole
Yeah.
thing is
You're
now
in
over.
contempt.
Goodbye." Yeah.
Yeah. I'm surprised they said it out loud, but I'm not surprised at the sentiment, because for a couple of reasons. One, because the whole the burden has shifted when you're into the appellate stage. So
Except
almost
hasn't really. Mhm. I
right.
mean,
Well, I mean, it shifted against that, where now the appellant has to prove their case, right? So like, the judges are defending the finality of justice. They're defending the judge's ruling, and you have to provide enough evidence to break through it. So like, that bias is kind of there already, but even with that, I was surprised that they said, and they said, and if that, I think that was because several people have said it. That must have been the exact words they said were, "Our sympathies are with the trial
mm,
judge," is a weird way to put it.
mm,
But yeah, it's frustrating to hear it, but it's almost just like saying the obvious out loud. Like, that's appellate law. Like, that's what happens all the time. Like, you have to.
right.
That's why it's less than 1% of appeals, or of cases, or convictions are overturned, because there it's such a high burden to get over a judge ruled, and so, I don't know, it frustrates me too, because it's like, they look at judges like they're not just like people that are fallible. It's
Right.
like, a judge ruled this. Who do you think you are to question a judge's ruling?
Right.
Mere trial attorney. Who do you think you are? That's kind of
Right.
like the attitude of the appellate court system in
Yeah.
America.
But obviously, I made the weird sound that I made when you said the burden has shifted, because that there are times, many times, where that can feel like the burden didn't shift at all. The burden was always on the defense.
Right, when it shouldn't have been
The
at
burden on
trial.
paper is not on the defense,
Yeah.
but the burden on it's kind of
Especially because
a
in
little
that
bit of
case,
a ruse. Yeah.
when you're at
Yeah.
trial, you're dealing with ordinary folks
Yeah.
outside the system,
Yeah.
jurors
All
who
these
even
people, this person is sitting at that table. There is a reason they're sitting at that table. Prove to me that that person shouldn't be sitting at the table.
right,
Well,
even
that's
though on
not how it's supposed to
paper
work.
yeah, even though on paper that's not where the burden's at, and like, you agree that that's what I've always said that too. It's like, that's the biggest flaw in our system, is that the presumption of innocence is a fallacy. It doesn't really exist in
Yeah.
most cases with juries.
But it's so interesting. It's always so interesting. I don't want to get too off topic, but it's always so interesting to hear like back to back complaints from defense attorneys and from prosecutors, because I have heard so many prosecutors be like, I mean, they have it so easy. The defense can just lie. They can just make stuff up. We have the burden of the truth, but defense lawyers could just be as sleazy as they want. And they get to have the last say because they get, you know what I mean? Like they get to, they get to present their case second. So they get to just like, they get to play with everything we've said and just like turn it into lies. So it's like, depending on what perspective you're coming from, you also have this perspective that, you're the good guy and you're fighting hard and you don't have
Yeah,
you like the weight of it is against you.
and you can spin that any way you want too, right?
Yeah.
Depending on your perspective, because you can also be like, the prosecution gets to make their entire case to the jury for days, sometimes weeks, and completely convince them before the defense ever gets a chance to put on a witness. And then the final word, the final story that the jury gets to hear, because they have the burden, is the prosecution giving their final rebuttal and closing. So like they get the first word and the last word,
Yeah.
in the whole thing. But then
No, for sure.
a prosecutor would spin it the other way and be like, "Well, they get to present all this evidence after ours is done, and they already know our we don't know their case. They know our." There's always ways to
Right, right.
spin it.
Yeah. But then that's the other thing that I think Mata has really tried to shine a light on, very specifically, is this idea of how the media also is this like third leg
Yeah.
in the way that cases are perceived and the way things are determined as like, well, this person must be guilty. Because also the prosecutor made this whole speech on television and told me about all these things that this person did.
Yeah.
And if you don't get your to tell your side of the story, then that's also, poisoning the jury pool and all of that is also like a really
Yeah.
big topic that I think, doesn't always get hit
Yeah.
quite as hard as it should.
And truthfully, that order of operations in the trial too, I think makes it, because it's something that I deal with. We're getting ready to start a new season, and that was a lot of our production meetings with me and Erica this week, was trying to figure out how do we present that first episode, because I've done it where let's go ahead and lay out the case right away for how this person got convicted, and then we'll start to tear it apart. And oftentimes I find that even diehard Truth and Justice listeners who believe in wrongful convictions, they believe they happen, they get like, you can convince them that they're guilty, and you can't once they've dug into that belief, it's hard to get people to shift sometimes. And
Yeah.
then and there's other times you present it a different way, like, well, let's just not even talk, season 5, let's not talk about them at all until we get to them. And then you find a different result, and it's like trying to find what's fair, what's the right way to do it is tricky.
Sure.
So just like knowing knowing how how humans react to hearing those arguments, and in what order, and where they
Mhm.
dig into. In my line of work, I can see how that also, I'm sure, has a great effect in how attorneys deal with it in their line of work when they're in a trial.
Absolutely. And just in the chat, of course, Jennifer's here. Hello, Jennifer Hill. She does say Jamie's big advocate, Ray Wilson, is a former police chief. He was at the hearing and thinks Jamie will get a good ruling. And it's true that there have been situations, and I think you even name dropped Adnan and the fact that it seemed
Yeah.
like maybe that lawyer or that judge was going to be like, shame on you. No, absolutely not. You're not getting out. That you do have this sort of, I don't want to say tough love because that's maybe sounds too positive and kind, but where the judge is going to just lay into you no matter what and
Mhm.
and really just poke every hole and try to tear it apart and just really tax you, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to give you a favorable ruling. Like that's
Or
just
a
that
fair
they take
ruling.
their or a fair ruling that they just take that job very seriously and they're like, "My job is just to tear this to pieces as much as I possibly can and see how that argument holds up against it,
Yeah.
and then I'll make my decision." But yeah.
Well, yeah, what you wanna see is what happened in Adnan's case, where the judge was pretty rough, and they really pushed hard and asked a lot of hard questions, and kinda gave everybody this impression. But at the end of the day, the judge went back and considered how the law should be applied, and applied it fairly, and resentenced Adnan, even though maybe she didn't feel that that was the best, personally, that was the best outcome. That the law was pretty clear. I think most people agreed that if there was anybody that had everything aligned to be resentenced, it was Adnan, and she ruled that way.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, Pamela wanted to just pop into the post to say if anybody needs a quick rundown of Jamie's case, like if for some reason you can't go back and commit to that full season that Bob Ruff did, which is fabulous, But if you want, a quick primer to stay up to date with what's going on right now, you can listen to Jason Flom and John Grisham, who covered it on Wrongful Convictions. She says it's episode 517, so you can sort of get
Yeah.
the episodic bite-sized version. So yeah, I think, and then I think also, wasn't it just there was an appellate hearing with judges, I think that Justin, Anon's lawyer, did with those. I remember someone really laying into Justin and hearing of the best way I can imagine something going in terms of like how a defense attorney shows up, an appellate attorney shows up and just accepts every question and then just very calmly has an answer for everything.
Yeah.
When you can hear the version of it that's like, wow, this is kind of irrefutable. But this particular situation is hard because there was so much evidence and because the judge had this opportunity to kind of lay into them about, oh, you needed to be more specific, why is it our responsibility to fix this thing if not enough evidence was tested?
Right.
How is that our problem? Jen says, I just wish you had someone on with a lot of knowledge in his case, especially post conviction, such as Tam or Andy, because there were numerous issues with the fingerprints collected at the crime scene since they were collected in 1991, which is what the presiding judge at the oral arguments focused on. I also would have liked to have known Mada's opinion on Levy's assertions. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Assertions toward the end of her arguments and in her rebuttal about A, the defense needing to meet a low bar for DNA testing to happen, B, if unknown DNA is found not just in prints, but on the two bullets and or on the victim's clothing, crossover, that will point to the killer as opposed to only finding it on one item tested. I just wish more details about the actual oral arguments had been discussed. And it's true, it wasn't a play-by-play like we do sometimes where,
Mhm.
Bob is taking copious notes and he's just sort of almost like recreating the hearing as it's happening.
Yeah,
Um,
and for me, I was at a bit of a disadvantage too because I was relying on Bob to share, what happened there, and that was kind of like his 30,000-foot view of the important elements of it. But yeah, I know there's a lot more to it, and it really is, like he said, it really comes down to a really basic argument. Like, what I don't see what argument a judge could make to not approve testing when all you're doing is getting more information and the defense is paying for it. Like, there isn't a downside here anywhere. Like, it's always like, it seems like sometimes the judges or whoever or the prosecution, they want to put the cart before the horse and be like, well, yeah, but what if we find this and then what? It's like, well, why don't we first?
mm,
It's just like the West Memphis 3 case, which, by the way, on that, still very frustrating with that. It was February 25th. The DNA testing was supposed to be done on that case. I talked to Lori, Damien's wife, just the other day. I was like, what's going on? And it's like, they don't know. Like, nobody knows what is happening right now. We were
ugh,
told the night before that the judge or the prosecutor was sick, and that's why they couldn't do it that day. And then since then,
right.
nobody knows what's happening. So I don't know what the hell is going on there.
I don't love
Um,
that.
yeah, I don't either. But in that case, it's like, there's a lot of people all over the internet that are trying to say, well, it's this person or this person or this person. It's like, why don't we just get the evidence tested, figure out what's there, and then we'll see if it's helpful or not helpful or what we can do with it. And that's what should happen in this case. I don't see any plausible excuse. I mean, I can see where the judge could make arguments now, like where Jennifer's talking about like DNA from the bullets, like that makes sense. That these are things that the killer touched, like
Yeah.
the cash register, fingerprints on the cash register, things like that. Um, that I don't see any reason why you wouldn't test those things, as opposed to like fingerprints from the door, which, as Bob talked about, was weird that they, in the first round of appellate hearings, they were trying to get.
Yeah, I was confused about that too. Yeah, I just don't know. Yeah, that was confusing. It's hard when it feels like you're at a disadvantage because you don't know or remember why that seemed like it was so important
Yeah,
when
because I wouldn't
everyone
think.
everyone on every side looking at it today is like, it doesn't seem like the best way to go."
Yeah, there's gonna be
Huh.
tons of fingerprints on the door, but,
Yeah.
in any cases, we'll get a ruling soon, and we'll have a little more detail on it, and maybe I'll reach out to Tam or somebody, see if she wants to come on and, um, explain a little more what's happened, or maybe we can even reach out to Jamie if we're able to make that connection again.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I do
and
get I mean, yeah, to your point, when you're paying for it yourself, that's a different and you're like, "Just let us do this." Then I guess the only argument you can make is like, what if you're not treating it responsibly? But if you can have a witness from the state for every step of the way, there just isn't an argument. I
well,
understand when the argument is like, no, we're not going to spend the state's money when all of these other things are, when there's this huge long
right.
line for testing and da da da. Like, I understand that argument.
But but the custody thing, like, that's come up in the West Memphis 3 case. People tried to make that argument, like, "Oh, well, they could," like, it doesn't. The state is the custodian of the evidence,
Yeah.
and the way this works is the state will ship it directly to the lab, and the results will go right back to the state. Like,
Yeah.
there's no world where they're like, "Oh, you guys wanna test it? Okay, well, here it is.
Hey,
You
what's
guys
that
just"
over there? And then they
yeah,
quickly do
just
a swap.
yeah. Yeah, just take this and get it tested and let us know how it turns out. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it'll never be in the defense's hands ever.
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna go directly to the lab from the state, evidence room.
Yeah. Well, I thought this was interesting too. Jen posted a little more context kind of about the prosecutor, the state's attorney. She says at least six people were likely wrongfully convicted for murder, excuse me. At least six people were likely wrongfully convicted for murder when Charles Renard was McLean County, Illinois state attorney, 1983 to 2002. Jamie Snow, Bart McNeil, Alan Beeman served 13 years exonerated. Donald Whalen served 1991 to 2019 before wrongful conviction reversed. Dale Fostick died in prison in 2010, and Eric Drew. In Drew's case, the 4th District Appellate Court found the state withheld evidence of a deal Drew's cousin made with Detective Dan Katz, who drummed up all those jailhouse snitches to lie about Jamie at his trial, so that Drew's cousin testified that Drew committed the murder. Wow, we've heard similar stories, haven't we?
Yeah.
Drew claimed self-defense in killing Ronald Thornton. Drew accepted a plea deal, admitting to manslaughter after serving 11 years and was released from prison. Anyway, it's a pattern of corruption under Renard and Tina Griffin, who prosecuted Jamie. That is scary stuff, if true.
It is.
Not questioning you, Jen, by the way. I just don't know anything about this stuff, but I mean, we've seen it before.
Speaking of which, it just made me think about it. I'm just looking on the Facebook page right now. A listener, Frank, had posted on the fan page based on my discussion with Bob, where we talked about Bart McNeil. And I had said that I was on the podcast that was covering that case a few years ago.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, so someone found the episode and they posted it. So if you're interested in hearing
Oh, I
that,
am interested in it. Yeah.
so the podcast is called Suspect Convictions.
Right.
And I was on, looks like episode 4 was a roundtable with myself and Aphrodite Jones. I only vaguely remember that.
Got it.
But if somebody wants to go to episode 4, the title is Roundtable with Aphrodite Jones and Bob Ruff, about this. So that was kind of my take on the Bart McNeil case back then. That was, I don't know, 2018, something like that. And you see, it was only like there'd only been 3 episodes of his podcast out about it at that point. But if you're curious what I thought about it back then, I am too. So I may listen to it in my car ride that I have tomorrow. Because I don't remember. All I remember was Scott, I think was the name of the host.
Mm-hmm.
Was real excited about about it being a wrongful conviction. And I just feel like I remember from the little bit of information I had, I was like, I haven't seen, like, I'm not convinced of this yet. But now so many people seem to be with all the information that's come out since then. So I'm really
Yeah.
curious. I'm anxious for Bob to tackle it so I can, hear more about it, but also like what I thought then, what new information's out there, and how that shakes out.
Yeah, I'm definitely very interested as well. Kathy says, not a question, but a comment. I loved hearing Mata's take on this. He taught me a few things about the system and how it works. I truly believe in Jamie's innocence. He's so smart, funny, and compassionate, not an irredeemable punk, as the DA put it. I truly hope this goes in his favor. There is no reason not to test the evidence. Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy. And I think then that just leads us to Pamela's post, which is, if Jamie's appeal is denied, can someone, Bob Mata or someone else, explain Jamie's options and what he might recommend as next steps?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of covered that on the show, but it would, if the judges, and I think it was a panel of judges here, it was, if they deny the petition to do the DNA testing, then Jamie's next step would be to appeal that up to the next higher court. I don't know how many
Right. Yeah.
layers there are in in Illinois. I don't know if it would go to the Illinois State Supreme Court next, or if there's another step in between there. But he would just have to continue appealing that up the line a little bit. And then in cases like this, is like what we saw in the West Memphis 3 case, where where you have something that is innocuous as we just want to test evidence and we're willing to pay for it, and it gets denied. I think the further you get separated from the trial court and the trial judges, the more likely it is to get approved. I feel like,
Interesting.
just because, like what we heard, this judge says, my sympathies are for the trial judges. They're right there, they're just one step above them. They used to be
Mm,
trial judges. I think if you start to move where now you're getting into a state level to where there's less connection, and they're any kind of bias creeping in, they're able to look at the law a little more clearly. Because I
mm,
think Jennifer had mentioned in her post, one of them, and I did some reading on it too, that the bar for the defense to be able to get DNA testing approved is pretty low. It shouldn't be that hard for them to get it done. So
mhm.
hopefully we get a good ruling. If we don't, it would just get appealed back up above there. And then if we get to a point where all those appeals are exhausted on this, that's what stinks about the system, is like you don't get to try that again. You have to find something new. And that was kind of what we found when we were recovering Jamie's case in season 7, was we realized, at least at that point, because we didn't know, there were so many documents that hadn't been turned over that we haven't seen, nobody had seen, even Jamie hadn't seen. From the evidence we had, it was like, we're going to have to find out who did this. Like, you're going to have to solve this case to get Jamie out of there, because sometimes a weak case is the most difficult one to overturn on conviction,
Right.
because you've got nothing to work with. You're fighting air. There's nothing there. And when you have a case that goes damn near a decade before the arrest, and it's based on a bunch of jailhouse snitch testimony, and a jury buys it, then it's like all that exists. If you have 20 jailhouse informants that all say that he confessed, and 19 of them recant, but there's still one that doesn't, like, in most cases the conviction won't be overturned. They'll be like, well, you have to prove to us that what this person said is not true, because they said it. They haven't been impeached. They haven't been proven wrong. And it just sucks the way the way that's done. Like, we had that in Kerry Max Cook's case, where when they went for his, now eventually he did ultimately get declared actually innocent, but when his original actual innocence hearing, which was like 2016, 2017, back around there, that's why it got denied. It was like they went through every element of evidence against him and refuted every single element. The only one that remained was, there was a deputy sheriff that testified that Kerry confessed to him when he was in an elevator during the trial, and that deputy was dead. And so the judges ruled, well, there's still evidence that he confessed, that the jury heard, that you have nothing to tell me is not still a legitimate piece of evidence. That's enough, and they wouldn't overturn the conviction.
Mm. Well, that's what we have for this week.
Yeah, it's kind of bummer. I feel Jamie's got an uphill battle, but I think that our best hope right now, the thing that you could be pulling for and hoping for, is that they get the testing done, and
Yeah.
we just hope for a miracle. That, like I said, that, like, the bullet, if we can find DNA on a bullet, if we can find DNA on fingerprints on the cash register, like, there's got to be something, maybe something, if they can end back his clothing, anything like that,
Mm,
and find something to shake something loose. That's what we hope for, but we'll never know unless we get the testing done. So let's hope it happens here. If not, we'll just keep on keeping on and keep fighting it all the way up as far as we possibly can. Jamie, is another one of those. I think a lot of our cases, and he's one of them, like, clearly innocent, was completely railroaded, and just, he deserves to be home with his family. So let's just hope that happens sometime soon.
absolutely. What's going on next week?
Well, for this Sunday's episode, I had on, hang on. Well, for this Sunday's episode, just coming up in 2 days, we have an interview with Melissa Moore, who was the daughter of the Keith Jesperson, who was known as the Happy Face Killer. Um, Melissa has done a ton of work over the years. She wrote a book. Then she did a podcast called Happy Face. She's done a ton of advocacy work for victims' families, and also for families of, um, convicted murderers. It's another it's an interesting angle people don't think about. By the way, I would recommend it's a Zach. I did not warn Zach. I told him all about the cinematography, but did not warn him that it's a real bummer. But the new Netflix series, Adolescence, um, it kind of gives you some really good insight into that kind of feeling where nobody thinks about what about the family of
Yeah.
the person that committed this horrible thing and what happens to their lives afterwards. And Melissa went through that. She tries to help people through that. So she wrote the book, and then um, she had the podcast called Happy Face, which is still available to listen to. And right now, I believe this Thursday, the fourth episode airs on Paramount Plus of the new series Happy Face that stars Dennis Quaid. That's really good. That she's an executive producer on, and she's helped put
Mm.
together. So Melissa comes on and she talks about kind of that process. She talks about her life going through finding out, completely shocked while she's in high school, that her father is a serial killer when nobody ever had any idea. Super interesting interview. That's coming up this Sunday, and then we'll talk to all of you guys again next week on next week's follow up. Bye,
Sounds
guys.
good. Thanks, everybody.
All right. I'm glad you said that. I totally forgot that I was going to tell people that Melissa's coming on, and
Mhm.
you'll find there's a few moments of levity there where we find out that her and I are the same person when it comes to not knowing who celebrities are and acting a fool around them.
Great.
Yeah,
I look forward to that.
give you a little spoiler. While she's having dinner with Dennis Quaid, she told him that she always thought an actor that would be great to play her dad because he was
No,
so big and tall was
no.
Randy Quaid. Or no, she didn't say that. She said, I always thought the guy who played Cousin Eddie would be great.
Oh my god,
So
that's so funny.
Dennis is like, that's my brother, right? She's like, what? Really?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I like a little levity. God
Yep.
knows we need it. Um, all right. Well, I guess Jennifer says that Jamie called, her today. He'd love to talk with you if you have time. So I don't
I
know if
did
you
not
guys
see
wanna
that, but thank
offline
you.
about that.
Yep.
Um, yeah. Well, I
I
guess you're gonna go I don't know, yawning, but I keep
7:40.
thinking about you wanting to sit on your couch.
That's what I yeah,
You've really implanted that. Now it's my priority. My life priority is
it
you
really
getting to
is.
sit on your new couch. That's
We're
not cool.
done before bedtime, and
Yeah.
there's a couch calling my name for
All
me to
right.
sit on.
Do what you
Enjoy.
gotta do.
Thanks, Janet. Love you. Love all you
Love
guys
you,
in the chat.
buddy.
We'll talk to
Love
you
you
guys
guys. Thank
later.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.